Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere bright. Not bright as in enlightening, more like literally glowing, searing, blazing with divine smugness. We're climbing Mount Olympus, not to battle titans or witness epic heroics, but to watch a god bomb a comedy routine harder than the fall of Icarus. Yes, Apollo, god of the sun, music, healing, plague, archery, and apparently now stand-up comedy. You're about to witness history's most awkward celestial career change. And honestly, you probably wouldn't survive this open mic night unless you had the skin of a hydra and the humor tolerance of a drunken satyr. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where and when you're listening from. It's always fun picturing this tale being heard at 3 a.m. in Reykjavik or right before sunrise in Jakarta. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing just below the marble threshold of Olympus's central hall, its architecture somehow both timeless and in need of renovation. Clouds drift lazily around your ankles like over-enthusiastic fog machines, and the scent of divine incense clings to everything, even your eyelashes. Ahead, you hear harp chords being awkwardly plucked, followed by a voice trying very hard to sound casual. Hey everyone, I just flew in from Delos and boy are my horses tired because, sun chariot? Silence. A cricket chirps. Somewhere in the distance, a dryad coughs politely. You inch forward and see him. Apollo perched awkwardly on a podium made from polished ambrosia crates, dressed in a tunic far too sparkly to be humble. His golden lyre hangs awkwardly at his side like a failed prop. He clears his throat and tries again. So Zeus walks into a thunderstorm. Groans ripple across the divine audience. Hermes is already texting under the table. Dionysus is sipping from a goblet the size of a chariot wheel, and Hera's expression is so flat it could press olives. This, you realize, is not just a comedy show. This is an ego unraveling in real time. You shift uncomfortably on your cushion, which is woven from Pegasus mane and feels weirdly damp. Why is everything slightly moist up here? Divine humidity. You stifle a yawn. Apollo doesn't notice. He's too focused on his scroll of jokes, which he unrolls dramatically. You know, when I cured that plague in Thessaly? Yeah, they didn't even give me a thank you fruit basket. Just another statue of me, like I need another torso with weird abs. He forces a laugh, it bounces off the ceiling and crashes to the floor like a dropped amphora. Somewhere to your right, Athena whispers to Artemis, is this performance art or a cry for help? Even Ares, god of war, who normally cheers for blood over punchlines, winces. He's killing me, he mutters. But not in a good way. Apollo presses on. I mean, I'm the god of music, right? So why is it every time I play in a tavern someone yells, play Wonderwall? That song doesn't even exist yet. There's a faint chuckle from the back. Maybe Eros. He's always been a sucker. For temporal puns. The thing is, Apollo's delivery isn't terrible, his timing's all right, he's got the charisma. But something's off. Maybe it's the sheer pressure of performing for a crowd of immortals, each of whom has personally witnessed the birth of sarcasm. Or maybe it's that he's never been laughed at before, and isn't quite sure if he wants to be. You start to zone out, lulled by the awkward cadence and the gently glowing walls. Your eyelids feel heavy, your brain begins to wander. You picture Apollo in a back alley of Athens, offering 2 drachma Tuesdays for poetry readings, or maybe headlining a dinner cruise on the river Styx, complete with sad lyre covers of Eurydice's top hits. Still, there's a strange charm to it all. The god who once smote entire cities with a glance now fumbling with knock-knock jokes. It's like watching a lion try to be a house cat. Then he launches into a bit about minotaurs and mazes that ends, with a pun so bad it causes actual thunder in the distance. Guess that joke really labyrinthed itself. Even Poseidon groans from his waterlogged lounge chair. And yet, there's a stubbornness in Apollo's eyes. He wants this. He's tired of being taken seriously, tired of carrying the weight of brilliance and sunlight on his bronze shoulders. He just wants, for once, to make someone snort ambrosia out of their nose. And that desire, that almost makes you root for him. Almost. As you nestle deeper into your cushion, the voice of Apollo continues to echo softly through the hall. a warm drone of misguided humor and celestial dad jokes. It blends with the soft hum of Olympian magic in the walls, and your body begins to sink further into stillness. But don't fall asleep just yet. The next section gets worse. Way worse. Apollo's about to seek feedback from the most terrifying critic of all, his sister. Ready to keep going, just say the word, continue. You shift slightly, your body half melded with the cushion, just in time to catch Artemis narrowing her eyes. She doesn't sit like the rest of the gods. No, Artemis stands in the back with her arms crossed and her quiver still strapped on, like she might shoot the next punchline that offends her. Apollo, blissfully unaware or perhaps dangerously optimistic, adjusts his laurel wreath and squints toward her. Oh, come on, sis. You look like you just tracked mud into a temple. No. Response, he tries again. So Artemis walks into a forest. Hair pores so dense you could harvest it for olives. And she says, why is there always a naked guy hiding behind a tree? A collective gasp. Ares chokes on his pomegranate seeds. Aphrodite mutters, he did not. Because, of course, everyone remembers the Actaeon incident. You know, when a hunter accidentally saw Artemis bathing, and she turned him into a deer and let his own dogs tear him apart. Light-hearted family humor, right? You glance toward Artemis, who is now tilting her head just slightly, enough to make everyone within range sit up straighter. Apollo clears his throat. Too soon. Artemis doesn't blink. You tell that. Joke again, and I'll replace your lyre strings with your intestines. You'd think that would be enough to end the set, but no. Apollo is glowing now, literally, like a toddler who just discovered sarcasm. He paces, bouncing on the balls of his golden sandals. You know, Artemis always says she prefers animals to people, but have you ever tried having brunch with a wolf? Terrible table manners. And don't even ask about the bill. A few polite titters. Dionysus raises his goblet in a half-hearted toast. I like that one. Wolves are terrible brunch guests. True story. You begin to suspect this is less a comedy routine and more a thinly veiled therapy session. Maybe this whole thing started because Apollo tried shadowing a mortal open mic night in Corinth and got addicted to the rush of not being revered for 5 minutes straight. Now, despite the mild threat of disembowelment, he pivots to what he thinks is a softer topic. All right, let's talk about my childhood. You know when you're born on a floating island because your mom got kicked off the mainland for dating Zeus? Yeah, not exactly a stable upbringing. You chuckle despite yourself, because honestly, the birth of Apollo and Artemis was chaos. Leto, their mum, had to find a drifting island that wasn't nailed down just to give birth, because Hera had slapped a no vacancy sign on every other landmass out of sheer jealousy. Ancient family planning was aggressive. Apollo adds, try telling your therapist that your first crib was bobbing in the Aegean. That one lands better. Even Hermes lets out a wheeze-snort hybrid. You wonder if maybe Artemis is thawing. Then, Apollo makes a fatal mistake. He impersonates her voice. Oh, look at me, I'm Artemis. I hate boys, I love deer. Don't touch my trees or I'll curse your descendants for 9 generations. The silence is immediate. Not heavy, not tense, dead. You blink. You look to Artemis. She lifts her hand, not fast, not dramatic, just lifts it, and in it appears a shimmering moonlit dagger, casual like she just happened to find it in her pocket. Apollo freezes. Intermission. You don't see him move. 1 second he's on the stage, the next a faint golden streak vanishes behind a marble column. Hermes claps, slow and deliberate. 10 out of 10, he says, not for the comedy, but for the sheer audacity of mocking. Artemis, to her face, would watch again. You settle back, the tension in the room cooling like an extinguished forge. Artemis doesn't follow him. She sheathes the dagger, sits, and says dryly, finally, some peace. A low ripple of laughter trails across the chamber. Despite everything, you're not sure if Apollo's entirely done. There's still that glint in his eye, that refusal to accept that a god can't also be funny. In his own solar-powered, pun-heavy way. And here's the weird part, some historians still debate whether this moment actually happened. They point to fragmentary poems, scratched amphorae with what might be divine jokes, and rumors of an Olympian open mic night that ended in a thunderstorm and several cursed fig trees. Others insist it was metaphor. A symbolic tale of pride, sibling rivalry, and the dangers of overestimating your comic timing. But you're not buying it, you were there. You saw the god of the sun hide behind a pillar because his twin sister reached for a knife. You stretch your legs slightly and shift your head, letting the cloud cushion puff beneath your cheek. The sound of the gods returning to their usual. Chatter hums gently around you. You're pretty sure this show isn't over yet. Apollo's just getting warmed up, and his next gig, he's taking his act on tour. Just wait until he hits the underworld. There's a faint hum. Maybe it's a lyre string plucked off stage, or maybe it's the sound of your brain now entirely uncertain whether you're dreaming or just deeply invested in a mythological sitcom. You shift again, and in your peripheral vision, there's movement. Apollo slinks back into view, peeking out from behind the marble column with the kind of expression a teenager wears after trying to prank their older sister and realizing she keeps a sword collection. You expect him to call it a night. Instead, he clears his throat like nothing happened. So anyway, speaking of sisters who can eviscerate you with a glance, Zeus groans from his throne without even opening his eyes. Not again. Oh, I promise, this one's not about Artemis. Apollo steps fully into the light, hands raised like he's walking into a trap he knows is baited. No. Tonight, I want to talk about our cousin. You know, Hecate? The room tilts slightly. Hecate, goddess of witchcraft, ghosts, crossroads, and unsolicited midnight knocks on your cottage door. The kind of deity who doesn't attend many Olympus dinners, but still somehow knows everything that was said about her. Apollo continues undeterred. So you're standing at a fork in the road, it's midnight, and there's mist everywhere, and suddenly, bam! Hecate shows up with a torch, a key, and a dog with 3 eyes. Do you A, run, B, faint, or C, try to impress her with knock-knock? Jokes? Aphrodite, now painting her nails with what looks suspiciously like crushed starlight, mutters, Option D, never summon her name again. But Apollo's committed now. Fun fact, did you know Hecate once cursed a guy so hard that even his shadow left him? Like full-on ran away. That's impressive. That's customer service. You can't help but smile. It's that kind of weird, specific mythological detail that makes you wonder how many people were sitting around ancient hearths whispering, don't say her name. Also, don't forget to leave her garlic. Because, yes, garlic, that was a thing. The old rituals, fascinatingly odd, often involved offerings of food at the crossroads, bread, garlic, cheese. Picture it, a full moon, silence, maybe an owl hooting dramatically in the background, and someone gingerly placing snacks at a forked path, whispering, for Hecate, please don't haunt my pantry. You close your eyes a moment, imagining the scene. Apollo goes on, his voice softening. You know, she's not all spooky doom and gloom. Hecate's the one who guided Persephone when she returned from the underworld each spring. She's a torchbearer, a light in the dark. The original nightlight, honestly. You snort. He shrugs, basking in his own metaphor. I mean, what's more comforting than a death goddess who also helps you not trip on your way home? Still, not everyone's on board. Hera raises an eyebrow. You sure she's okay with this bit? Apollo spreads his hands. What's life without risk? Besides, Hecate's got a better sense of humor than you think. Ever read the scroll where she turned a nobleman into a doorbell? Hilarious. You suspect that scroll may have been lost for good reason. But then, just as you're wondering if he's about to push too far again, Apollo pauses. He turns toward you, not literally, but in the way that performers sometimes do when they realize their audience is more than a row of divine faces. Crossroads, he says, quieter now. They're not just places where paths meet. They're choices, turning points, places where you stop, hesitate, and ask, which way now? The room stills. Even we immortals have them. Moments when everything could go one way or another, and Hecate, she doesn't just haunt them, she guards them. That's kind of beautiful, don't you think? You feel your breath slow, because it is kind of beautiful. For all the grandeur and ridiculous egos of Olympus, here's a moment of something smaller, deeper, a flicker of truth behind the glitter. Of course it doesn't last. Hermes leans forward. Yeah, that's cool, but are you done monologuing, or do I need to throw a sandal? Apollo grins. You know I'm just warming up. My underworld material? Killer? The room groans in unison. Ares mutters, "If he says one more grave mistake pun..." But Apollo is already back in stride. Speaking of the underworld, have you ever tried doing stand-up for the dead? You know what's coming next. You settle deeper into the plush nothingness beneath you, the kind that feels like being slowly swallowed by sleep, but in a good way. Your limbs feel like they've melted into myth itself. And as Apollo prepares to recount how he tried to make Hades laugh, well, that's a tale worth dreaming through. You don't even open your eyes this time. There's a rhythm now. Apollo's cadence like waves against some ridiculous golden shore, lapping stories across the absurdities of Olympus with just enough charm to keep you hovering between awake and not. So naturally, when he says, "Let's talk about the underworld," you feel yourself sink just a little deeper into whatever kind of mythological fever dream this is. You ever bomb in front of a dead crowd? Apollo begins, pacing now, his sandals making soft taps like raindrops on marble. I have. Literally. Hades did not find my river Styx material funny. You sense Persephone somewhere nearby, rolling her eyes so hard it causes a seasonal shift. Look, Apollo continues, holding up a scroll. It started with a harmless idea. I thought, hey, the souls of the departed need entertainment too. Maybe some light comedy between all the eternal lamentations. You murmur internally, of course you did. So I show up, he says. Liar. In hand, best toga pressed, and I'm like, "Ladies and gentlemen and shades, have you ever noticed how Cerberus only listens to one of his heads?" Silence. Nothing. Not even a single ghost chuckle. Just this one soul slowly drifting toward the exit, mumbling, "Bring back Orpheus." That gets a ripple of giggles from the gods, not the mortals, mind you, who are too traumatized by Cerberus in general to find it funny, but Demeter, lounging, with a goblet of something suspiciously green, lets out a polite snort. Here's the thing, Apollo says, perching dramatically on a bench that appears out of nowhere. Hades is complicated. You shift slightly under your blanket, imagining the Lord of the Underworld, not as the mustache-twirling villain he gets painted as in cartoons, but more like the guy who runs HR for the afterlife. Tired, overworked, probably drinks his coffee, black and his ambrosia lukewarm. Did you know, Apollo says, wagging a finger, that Hades has a garden? Wait, what? Not kidding, he goes on. Underground, eternal twilight, glowing fungi, flowers that bloom in reverse. He and Persephone grow them together. You try to picture it. A quiet, eerie space filled with whispering vines and soft, bioluminescent petals. Death but cozy. Some historians think the whole kidnapping story was overblown, Apollo says casually. More like an awkward divine elopement gone public. He shrugs. The scrolls are vague. Then, also, did you know there's a river in the underworld made entirely of forgotten dreams? True story. You drink from it and poof. Every plan you ever abandoned floods back in slow motion. It's basically a live TED talk from your past self. You chuckle quietly, a little nervous. A little too real. Anyway, he continues, my show went downhill the minute I tried a joke about Tantalus. You know the one. I said, Tantalus walks into a bar, tries to order a drink, but the glass keeps floating out of reach. Long pause. Nothing, Apollo sighs. I even added jazz hands. Even Hera can't help it this time, she chokes on her nectar. You should have just read them a bedtime story, she says, fanning herself. Maybe something light. Like the Iliad. Apollo shrugs again. I left before someone threw a pomegranate at me, and just when the laughter fades, he leans back, eyes flickering more serious. But you know, he says, voice lower now, the underworld isn't all gloom and punishment. He glances toward the edge of the dais. There's a kind of peace to it, a rhythm. Hades doesn't crave war, doesn't meddle in Olympus gossip. He just tends to what's his. That's got its own kind of nobility, don't you think? You do. And somewhere in that quiet space, the clink of golden goblets fades into the hush of wind over asphodel. Apollo's voice softens. I saw Sisyphus once, he murmurs, still pushing that boulder. But every time it rolled back down, he smiled like he knew something we didn't. He lets that hang a moment later. Maybe that's the joke. Maybe that's the point. The room drifts again, slower now, like someone dimmed Olympus itself. A featherlight pause. Then, predictably, Hermes chirps, "You know what they say. Dying is easy. Comedy is hard." Apollo groans, "You do too. But you're still smiling. Still. Floating. Still listening." And the next story's already humming under Apollo's tongue like a lyre string waiting to be plucked. Apollo taps the stem of his lyre against his knee. You hear the soft thunk like a heartbeat, as if Olympus itself is leaning forward to listen. "So," he says, twirling the lyre like a bartender with too much time and not enough patrons, "let's talk about love." A collective groan ripples through the air, not because the gods are tired of love stories, but because they're never just love stories. With the Olympians, they're sprawling soap operas with divine egos, glitter, betrayal, and the occasional metamorphosis into a tree. "You'd think being the god of poetry would make me the expert," Apollo says. But no, Cupid gets the "thou and I get" rhyming couplets. You imagine him shooting sonnets at people. Honestly, more dangerous than arrows if you're not into iambic pentameter. He stands again, paces. His tunic shimmers a little in the torchlight. "There was this one time," he says, "I fell hard. Her name was Daphne. You've heard the name. Maybe in passing, maybe etched in stone somewhere in a park with a confusing statue. Beautiful, brilliant, and entirely uninterested in me," Apollo continues, smiling the kind of smile you wear when a story still stings a little, which only made me want her more naturally. "Because I am a god of very healthy boundaries." He pauses. "That was sarcasm. You laugh softly. You know the type. The more aloof they are, the faster the Olympians descend like seagulls. On a sandwich. Anyway, I tried everything," he says. "Compliments, lyre solos, my best poem about sunlight on olive branches." You raise a metaphorical eyebrow. "It was a great poem," he insists. "But none of it worked. She wasn't interested," he says simply. "She was one of Artemis's girls, sworn to independence. She wanted forests, not fireworks." And here comes the turn. "You feel it. I chased her once," Apollo says, voice dropping low. "Just once. Across a meadow, heart in my throat, pride already in ruins. And just as I reached her, just as my fingers grazed her arm," he stops. "You wait." She turned. Into a tree. Silence. A tree, you guys. A literal laurel tree. Someone in the room lets out a snort. Maybe Ares. Apollo sighs. And not even a cool tree, like an apple or something. Just leaves. Nice smelling, yes, but still. I was left hugging bark while the nymphs giggled from the shadows. You imagine the scene. A glowing god clutching a freshly sprouted shrub, trying to look majestic while deeply, deeply rejected. "It was humiliating," he says. "So naturally I made the laurel my sacred symbol. Because if you can't win the girl, brand the breakup." You smile. There it is again, that Olympian logic. When life gives you metaphorical lemons, turn them into a crown and declare yourself a winner anyway. But here's the wild part, he adds. The laurel wreath? You know, the one they give to victors in games, poets in competitions? You nod or maybe just breathe a little deeper. "That's her," Apollo whispers. "That's Daphne." He glances toward the lyre, his fingers brushing the strings absent-mindedly. "Every time I'm honored, she's there, wrapped around my head like a memory." A long pause. Historians still argue whether she chose the transformation or if the gods interfered on her behalf. Either way, had she got away, she became something permanent, rooted, untouchable. His voice trails off, and you feel it like the end of a long note echoing in a quiet hall. Then, as if pulling himself back from a dream, Apollo perks up. Also, fun fact, Zeus once turned into a swan to seduce someone, which puts my awkward poetry in very flattering perspective, doesn't it? You almost spit out air. "And yet I'm the one who gets mocked for bad flirting," he mutters, then grins. "I never turned into poultry, thank you very much." Someone in the background coughs something that sounds like golden retriever. Energy. You feel the flicker of divine side-eyes. Apollo ignores them. "But you know," he says, "maybe love is supposed to be difficult. Maybe it's not about conquest or clever lines. Maybe it's just moments. The chase, the tree, the wreath, the memory." He sits back down, eyes distant now, the comedic edge softened into something slower. Even gods don't always get It right, and that lands heavy like a final chord. You don't move, you don't need to. The warmth of torchlight, the faint rustle of laurel, a hint of citrus in the breeze. Somewhere in the quiet, you swear you feel bark under your fingertips, and the story folds itself around you once again. Apollo leans forward, elbows on his knees, fingers steepled like he's about to confess something scandalous. Though with the gods, it's hard to tell where scandalous ends and Wednesday begins. So picture this, he begins. Olympus, midwinter. Hera's throwing one of her legendary everyone pretend we're a happy family dinners. Dionysus has already spiked the ambrosia. Ares brought his girlfriend and her husband. And me, I decided it was the perfect night to try stand-up. You blink? Yes. Stand-up comedy on Olympus, performed by the literal god of music, prophecy, and plague. Honestly, Apollo says, how hard could it be? I'm charming, I've got rhythm, and I once made a Spartan warlord cry with a limerick. He clears his throat theatrically. So I stroll into the great hall, lyre in hand, confidence peaking, and I say, what's the difference between Zeus and a cloud? He pauses. The cloud stops at one lightning bolt, a silence falls. You could have heard a pin drop, he mutters. If anyone on Olympus actually used pins. You picture the gods seated around the grand marble table, Athena sipping wine politely, Hades not even pretending to hide his grimace, Hermes whispering puns into someone's toga, and Zeus blinking like he's wondering whether to smite or laugh. Turns out, Apollo says, divine comedy is a tough crowd. You'd think immortality would give them a sense of humor. Nope. He picks at a grape from a golden bowl. My next joke. Artemis walked into a moonlit glade with a bow and a bad attitude, and that's when she threw a knife at me. You hear that one? Not near him, at him. It only grazed my ego, Apollo adds. Still hasn't healed. The gods, you learn, are not big fans of self-deprecating humor, or brother-sister roasts, or really anything that doesn't involve someone getting turned into an animal. Historians, Apollo says, still argue whether I was trying to evolve the concept of oral tradition or just deeply bored. I like to think I was pioneering something new. Call it mythological stand-up. Call it poetry with punchlines. He drums his fingers on the table. But here's the thing. The jokes bombed, yes. But later that night, Hermes came by. Slid me. A scroll said, stick to the sun chariots, but that Zeus joke, not bad. You grin, sometimes even gods need after-show encouragement. And it got me thinking, Apollo says. Why do we always tell stories the same way? Why all the drama? The thunder, the oaths? Why not a laugh? Why not make the heavens giggle? You feel a breeze then, maybe real, maybe just his presence shifting around the story. It smells faintly of roasted figs and burnt parchment. So I started writing differently, he continues. Little tales, satirical epics, the Iliad but from the horse's perspective, Hector's helmet, a memoir. You almost choke. You can see that book cover. He smiles. None of it was ever performed, not officially, but I left them in corners, tucked between scrolls. Just little reminders that even we, gods, warriors, muses, are allowed to be ridiculous. He gazes into the hearth, flames reflecting off his gold-ringed eyes. Because let's be honest, half our myths are already sitcoms in disguise, and you believe him. The bickering, the disguises, the dramatic entrances, it's the real housewives. Of Olympus, but with more shape-shifting and fewer commercial breaks. Zeus once forgot he had turned into an antelope to woo someone and couldn't change back for 3 days, Apollo adds. Hera made him eat grass. You snort. That one didn't make it into the official records, he winks. But still, not all jokes landed. Not all laughter was kind. There were times when even a god's voice felt small in a room full of power. Times when the lyre was too quiet, the punchline too risky. I bombed that night, he admits, but I didn't stop. I just changed venues, whispered to mortals in their dreams, planted stories in the minds of playwrights, gave comedians that extra sparkle before they went on stage. He sits back, resting the lyre across his lap. So if you've ever laughed at something strange in the middle of the night, something you can't explain, maybe it was me. Still trying out material. A pause. Still hoping someone laughs. And suddenly the god doesn't seem so far away. Not some bronze hero in the clouds, but a performer, a brother, a storyteller with bad timing and better intentions, The fire crackles. Somewhere you think you hear a soft laugh echoing in the distance. Maybe Hermes, maybe you. And once again, the story sways, the flames dim, and the room leans into the next tale waiting in Apollo's endless repertoire. You blink a few times, the warmth of Apollo's voice still ringing faintly in your ears, when suddenly the scent of molten bronze and olive oil creeps into the air. It's thick and oddly comforting, like a workshop at dusk, or a high-end candle. Labeled Ancient Labor, the sound changes too. Metal clinks rhythmically, soft as wind chimes in the distance. Then you feel it, the pulse of a forge, slow and deep like the heartbeat of the earth. Ah, Apollo murmurs, and now we come to my dear half-brother, Hephaestus, the god of fire, forge, and occasionally really uncomfortable party planning. You feel soot swirl around your feet as the scene changes. Olympus is now cluttered with easels, sculptures, half-finished automata twitching in corners. Clay cups of ambrosia are balanced precariously on anvils. It was an art show, Apollo says, voice lowering into something between admiration and disbelief. Yes, an actual art show, curated entirely by the god most people only remember for being the lame one. He pauses. Lame in both the limping sense and the unfairly underappreciated sense, mind you. You lean forward, mentally at least. Hephaestus, you discover, wasn't just Olympus's blacksmith. He was a visionary. While other gods were flinging lightning or sipping nectar, he was busy soldering together solar-powered bird cages and designing chairs that politely refused to let Hera sit. That's a real story, Apollo chuckles. One of his earliest works, the Petty Throne. Once she sat down, it locked her in place until she apologized. Spoiler, she never did. You stifle a laugh. Of course she didn't. So one year, in what can only be described as an interdivine experiment in taste, Hephaestus invited every Olympian to his private gallery exhibit. The theme? Function meets fancy. Zeus was confused, Apollo says, because nothing exploded. Ares tried to duel one of the sculptures. Aphrodite pretended to be flattered but didn't actually look at anything. Apollo, for his part, was genuinely impressed. There was this fountain that played harmonies when you touched the water, a harp made of lightning, a goblet that filled with your favorite drink the moment you looked at it. Mine knew to pour lukewarm grape soda. I didn't even like grape soda, not until that moment. But of course, not everything went smoothly. Hermes convinced Dionysus that the automaton waiters were sentient, so now you've got the god of wine trying to unionize robots. He shakes his head fondly, and in the center of it all, Hephaestus, battered tunic, arms scarred from years of forging, a beard singed at the ends, stood by a sculpture made entirely from discarded mythologies. It was twisted and stunning. Chimera of forgotten tales, unspoken dreams, and melted down halos. No one knew what to say, Apollo admits. Except Athena. She just nodded once and said, "He made silence visible." That's when I knew this wasn't just some forge-warmed vanity show. And here's the thing you didn't expect. Hephaestus didn't make these things for praise. He wasn't chasing divine clout or immortality. He already had that, obviously. He was building a new kind of worship, quiet admiration, soft awe. Historians still argue whether that exhibit was the birth of modern aesthetics or just a celestial craft fair, Apollo quips, but either way, it left a mark. You feel it too, somehow. That fusion of invention and intention, the idea that even a god could feel overlooked. There's something deeply funny about the most underappreciated deity being the one who built every other god's throne, Apollo says. Like designing all the office chairs but never getting invited to the meetings. You nod. You get it. And then Apollo adds softly, Hephaestus never spoke much, but if you stood close enough to his work, it hummed back. A low vibration buzzes in your chest now. Maybe it's the forge's heartbeat still echoing. Maybe it's your own then. As the light flickers, Apollo's tone lightens. Also, the man baked insane sourdough. No one ever talks about that. Probably why he got way more RSVPs for his next exhibit/brunch. He lets that one hang in the air. And just like that, the heat fades. The metal cools. The workshop becomes mist. And you're drifting again, the story rolling over you like a warm tide. Coming up next, the time Dionysus tried to invent a hangover cure so strong it became illegal on Olympus. The world shifts again and you feel tipsy, not in the chaotic "where did I put my sandals" way, but in the soft lantern light and laughter way, as if Olympus itself just uncorked a bottle of something old, sweet, and slightly illegal. You're not entirely sure how you ended up here, but suddenly there's ivy climbing up marble columns, and the floor's a little sticky with nectar. You hear a tambourine jingle somewhere off to your left. The air smells like fermented figs and candle wax. And yes, someone's pet leopard is wearing a wreath. Apollo clears his throat in mock seriousness. You might want to hydrate for this. 1. Tonight's tale is about my dear half-brother Dionysus, and the time he tried to solve a problem he definitely created, the divine hangover. He lets that hang for a beat. Now, imagine this, the god of wine, pleasure, and irrational karaoke has finally had enough of the consequences. And not for himself, mind you. He has the tolerance of a frat house in a hurricane, but for others, you can almost picture it. Dionysus, lounging in a grapevine hammock, sipping something frothy and purple, watching mortals and gods alike crawl into temples the morning after a festival, begging for just 1 hour without the drums, please. He saw the wreckage, smashed lyres, broken sandals, hungover poets crying into their scrolls, and decided, what if I could bottle relief? Yes, Dionysus, in a moment of divine empathy, or maybe boredom, set out to create a hangover. Cure worthy of Olympus. And like any Greek god who's definitely not a medical professional, his process was experimental. The first version was simple. Water from the river Lethe infused with honey and thyme made people forget they were hungover, Apollo explains. Also made them forget everything else, like their names, and how sandals worked. Next, he tried olives soaked in ambrosia. This worked great until people began randomly quoting Pindar in reverse and insisting they could taste colors. Eventually, he partnered with Hermes, because of course he did. If Dionysus was chaos, Hermes was the courier. Together, they made a potion called Never Ever Again, which ironically had the opposite effect. After one sip, gods woke up feeling so invincible, they threw another party immediately. Which is how we ended up with the 3-day bender. That created the constellation Vomitus Minor. Historians still debate whether that star cluster was a real myth or a sky-based inside joke. Anyway, Apollo continues, things got truly unhinged when Dionysus tried fermentation therapy. He'd rub fermented fig paste directly onto his temples and swear it realigned the wine chakras. You snort. The wine chakras. Of course, at one point Dionysus even staged a sober festival. No alcohol, just interpretive dance and cucumber water. No one came. Apollo sighs. Even the cucumbers left early. But here's the twist, the part they don't carve into amphorae. Dionysus did succeed, once. He brewed a potion from myrtle berries, goat's milk, a single drop of moonlight, and something called satyr tears, which no one has been able to replicate, probably because satyrs don't cry, unless you play harp music backwards, apparently. The result was a divine. One sip and your headache evaporated. Your stomach settled. Your regrets became abstract poetry. You remembered your ex, but only the good parts. It was a masterpiece, Apollo says with a sigh, and then, of course, Zeus banned it immediately. Turns out a hangover is a divine reminder. Maybe don't drink a chalice of molten stars next time. Also, there were side effects, Apollo adds delicately. The potion occasionally gave users an intense desire to open a vineyard, name it after their first crush, and write a 700-line epic about grapes, which, to be fair, I would have read. So the cure vanished, one of many forgotten wonders of Olympus. Some say Dionysus buried the recipe under Mount Nysa. Others say he is the cure, but only if you ask him nicely during a blood moon while wearing glitter. No one's tried that, Apollo shrugs. Mostly because we ran out of glitter. You feel yourself swaying gently as the music fades. A soft flute solo lingers in the background. Somewhere, a satyr trips over a sleeping nymph and mutters, "Not again." And as the revelry dims, Apollo's voice lowers. Dionysus wasn't just about chaos, he says quietly. He understood that sometimes the morning after matters more than the night before. a pause. Also, never trust a cure that fizzes before you drink it. The scent of grapes and myrtle fades. The lanterns blink out. Your head's a little lighter, your smile a little wider, and you're ready for what comes next. You blink and the world resets again. Gone are the sticky grapes and tambourines. Now you're somewhere much quieter, though no less strange. The clouds under your feet are unusually springy, like walking across 1,000 goose-feather mattresses. And looming above you, yes, that is definitely a massive golden structure with suspiciously dramatic columns. Welcome to Mount Olympus's one and only talent showcase. Apollo appears beside you, adjusting a laurel wreath that somehow now has glitter on it. You've seen the feasts, you've endured the hangovers. Now brace yourself for the god's annual open mic night. He whispers like someone sharing forbidden gossip in a library. It was called the Olympiacs, and yes, it was exactly as awkward as it sounds. Apparently, this little tradition started one spring when Hera suggested the gods could improve morale with a touch of cultural refinement. Naturally, this turned into Thespian Thursday, then Stagecraft Saturday, then, somehow, Apollo's Olympics. Because someone, Apollo coughs and points at himself proudly, thought it'd be fun to host a talent competition judged by 3 muses, one satyr and Artemis, who absolutely hated everything. Tonight's headliner, Apollo himself. You feel the air around you shimmer with discomfort. A lyre hovers in mid-air nearby, ominously out of tune. Yes, it's true, Apollo admits, rubbing the back of his neck. I did try stand-up comedy, once. In front of the entire pantheon, you stifle a laugh. Picture this, he says. A divine spotlight. Me in a toga with a glittery belt. I open with, so Hermes walks into a temple. And immediately, Poseidon booed so loud a minor earthquake happened off the coast of Crete. But it wasn't all disaster. His next joke? What do you call it when Athena forgets her keys? You raise an eyebrow. A philosophical dilemma, Apollo deadpans. Because technically she's already inside your mind. There's a pause, then he shrugs. That one got a polite chuckle from Demeter, or it might have been a sneeze. But here's the thing you didn't expect. Gods have stage fright. Yes, even immortals with the power to summon meteors get shaky hands and sweaty brows when holding a mic made from enchanted olive wood. Hephaestus once tried beatboxing. It was clunky. Artemis attempted a spoken-word poem about lunar cycles and existential dread. Dionysus did a one-god improv scene where he argued with himself, then cried, then laughed, then drank the props. There's a reason mortals were banned from attending, Apollo adds. The performances occasionally caused emotional whiplash, literally. Someone once sprained a memory. Still, one unexpected star emerged that night. Hades. You freeze. Hades, the god of the underworld? Oh yes, Apollo smirks. He read gloomy haikus about the passage of time and the smell of forgotten gold. And somehow, it worked. He won. The whole thing. His prize? A golden scroll and a coupon for one mortal soul, no expiration. But he gave it back, Apollo adds, said it ruined the pacing of his next piece. The most infamous act, however, involved Zeus. Zeus decided to do interpretive dance. You brace yourself. Imagine a storm cloud in sandals, spinning slowly while thunderclaps accent each dramatic pose. At one point, he mimed lightning striking injustice. At another, he just lay down and vibrated. Some historians think this may have been a metaphor for political unrest in Macedonia. Others think he just slipped. To this day, Apollo whispers, no one knows. But here's the part the myths leave out. For all their power and pride, the gods just wanted to be seen, to be clapped for, to hear laughter not born of fear or thunder, but joy. Even immortals, Apollo says, sometimes need a standing ovation, even if it's just from a very supportive goat. You chuckle softly, imagining a goat in the front row with a "We Apollo" banner. The lyre hums again, slightly more in tune. The stage dims and the glittery belt vanishes. Olympus returns to its usual stoic silence. But now you know the truth. Divine power may control tides and time, but applause, that's rare magic. And just maybe in some corner of the cosmos there's still a toga-wearing god writing jokes no one will ever hear. Somewhere between Olympus and wherever dreams are filed alphabetically, you feel yourself drifting again. This time there's no stage, no lyre, just the soft rustle of parchment and a warm breeze that smells faintly of figs and ambition. You find yourself in a sprawling marble hall, half library, half conspiracy board. Scrolls stacked in precarious towers, quills buzzing like bees. And in the center, hunched over a desk piled with wax tablets, is a deeply frustrated Athena. Yes, 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 wisdom and war, blah, blah, she mutters, stabbing a quill into a particularly stubborn scroll. But try organizing the entire pantheon's bureaucratic requests without going mad. Apparently, tonight's story is about something not found in most Greek myths: the paperwork. Welcome to the divine department of decrees. You lean over Athena's shoulder, careful not to disturb her owl, who is glaring at you like you just questioned the metric system. Let's see, she says, flipping through a massive tome labeled Petitions Filed, 86th Olympiad. Hermes wants official recognition of winged sandals as formal diplomatic attire. Dionysus has once again requested that all wine labels include poetry. And oh look, Poseidon's demanding coastal zoning rights for a seahorse parade. She sighs. He spelled parade wrong again. Turns out, ruling the cosmos requires more than smiting and feasting. Someone has to process the divine equivalent of memos, and Athena, ever the overachiever, took on the role as head of Olympus's chaotic admin department. There's a corner scroll titled Complaints About Mortals. You sneak a glance. Apollo's mad someone drew his nose wrong in a mosaic. Athena grumbles. Again, Zeus is threatening legal action because a temple goat bit his sandal, and someone named Jeff tried to sacrifice a ham sandwich. You blink. Jeff? Don't ask, she says. He shows up every century, always a sandwich, never any context. But not all entries are silly. One dusty scroll contains a carefully written appeal from a mortal farmer, asking why his harvest keeps failing despite his prayers. Athena runs a gentle finger across the faded ink. Some questions even the gods don't have good answers for. You pause, the mood dipping like a harp string snapped mid-song. But don't worry, she adds quickly. We still filed a divine inspection. Turns out his field was haunted by a moderately passive-aggressive dryad. Gave her a hobby. Problem solved. And here's the secret. While Zeus strutted and Apollo posed, Athena quietly held everything together. She invented the system, even the ink. She drafted the very laws that defined godhood, and rewrote them when Hades exploited a loophole that classified eternal darkness as a vacation package. Technically, she adds, pulling another scroll free with a flair, I also approved Apollo's comedy permit. Mistake I still regret. You hear a cough from the scroll tower behind you. A paper-thin Hermes emerges, draped in receipts. Package delivery, he says, handing Athena a scroll tied in glitter ribbon. What is it? New request from Eros, Hermes smirks. Wants a rebrand. Says Cupid sounds too much like stupid. Denied, Athena replies without looking. But there's a softer side too. Hidden between battle strategies and legal frameworks are scrolls filled with lullabies she wrote for mortal children. Poems to help heroes sleep the night before battle. Even a half-finished comedy script, probably meant for Apollo, filled with puns about owls and olives. Most scholars argue about whether Athena was more warrior or scholar, but what if she was something simpler? The god who kept receipts. Who made sure everyone else's chaos had a paper trail, even when hers went unread? You know, she muses, handing you a scroll with your name on it. Yes, really. The best kind of power isn't loud. It just makes sure everything works while no one's looking. You glance down at the scroll. It reads, approved for one more dream, 0 interruptions. Athena nods. Good luck. The next one's a bit eccentric. You're not sure what that means until the floor opens. Parchment becomes feathers, and you're floating again, toward the next divine oddity. You land softly this time, well, sort of. Your feet squish into something that can only be described as grape-scented custard. You look down. The floor is made entirely of jelly. Purple, shimmering, and vaguely judgmental. Before you can question your life choices, a fountain erupts nearby, spraying fizzy wine straight into a golden goblet held by, of course, Dionysus. He's reclining in a hammock made from leopard print and questionable life decisions, surrounded by dancing satyrs, floating pomegranates, and at least 3 flamingos that are definitely not native to Greece. "Ah, you must be the dream visitor," he purrs, swirling his drink with a tiny golden trident. "Don't mind the jelly floor, it's vintage. Welcome to the Festival of Excess, the most unhinged and least OSHA-compliant celebration on Mount Olympus. Tonight's host, Dionysus, god of wine, revelry, questionable theater productions, and emotional breakdowns disguised as toga parties." You stumble forward, greeted by a chorus of intoxicated nymphs arguing over whether sandals are considered formal wear. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey is playing the harp. It's better than you'd expect. Dionysus raises a toast. To confusion, to chaos, and to the time I accidentally turned a mortal into a dolphin because he spilled my wine. You raise a brow, he winks. They got over it, probably. This is the side of mythology most bedtime stories politely skip. Sure, Zeus throws thunderbolts and Athena writes essays, but Dionysus? He throws vibes. And yet, behind the spilled wine and glitter storms, there's something else. "People think I'm just a drunk," he says later, lying on a chaise lounge made entirely of grapes. But wine isn't just a party trick. It's transformation. Fermentation, darling. You take something bitter, like a bad day or a tragic myth, and you turn it into something sweet, warm, and just a little bit dizzy. You nod, slightly dizzy. "Yourself. Take theater," he adds, now somehow wearing eyeliner. "I invented that too, the masks, the drama, the 'oh no, my uncle is also my father' level plot twists." Indeed, Greek theater was born from Dionysian festivals, where audiences would weep, laugh, and occasionally pass out from heat stroke and bad acoustics. Historians still debate whether Dionysus's rites were religious ecstasy or just a really well-funded open mic night. Honestly, both. You watch as 2 satyrs reenact Orpheus and Eurydice using sock puppets and interpretive dance. It is emotionally devastating, and somewhere between a leopard wrestling a goose and a spontaneous limerick contest judged by a goat, you realize something. Dionysus isn't the god of drunkenness. He's the god of letting go. Letting go of grief, of control, of who you're supposed to be when no one's looking. "Mortals need a little madness," he whispers, refilling your dream cup. Otherwise, they start taking things like taxes and toenail clippings too seriously. You don't even question it. Later, he leans close, tipsy and soft-voiced. "Do you know what the first wine was made from?" You shake your head. "Teardrops," he says, "and laughter. It was an accident." Most magic is. There's a pause. Then he hiccups and turns a lily into a flute. "Anyway, remember, life is absurd, lean into it. And if someone says your party is too loud, invite them to dance." He snaps his fingers, and the jelly floor becomes clouds. One of the flamingos salutes you, and as Dionysus disappears into a giggling whirl of feathers and fireworks, you float onward once more, toward a mountain less sticky, but no less strange. You land with a satisfying thump on something cool and metallic, stone polish so smooth it reflects the starlight like a mirror. The clouds part above you, and in the shimmering dusk stands a woman in armor, her silhouette lit by the quiet glow of wisdom itself, Athena. She doesn't speak right away. Instead, she adjusts a gleaming bronze helm that looks like it was polished by the god's finest interns. The owl on her shoulder hoots once, dramatically. You're not sure whether it's approving or disappointed. Possibly both. Around you rises the temple of strategy, a swirling labyrinth of thought and logic and chessboards carved directly into the marble. Each move echoes, each whisper feels like it weighs truth. Athena turns to you, her voice even, precise, and strangely comforting. "Welcome, curious mind, you're late." You start to explain. There were flamingos, jelly floors, and sock puppet tragedies, but she waves it off. "The path of reason is never straight," she says. "More like a corkscrew designed by a committee." She leads you down a hallway, where murals shift depending on how you view them. One moment a battlefield, the next a classroom, then a kitchen where someone is clearly burning lentils while trying to write a political thesis. "People think I'm only about war," she says, running her hand over a fresco of hoplites frozen mid-charge. "But war without thought is just noise." It's why you fight that matters. You nod, pretending you haven't once argued over who ate your yogurt in the office fridge with less grace than a Trojan siege. Athena pauses at a mosaic depicting the infamous contest between her and Poseidon, the battle for Athens. Spoiler, she won with an olive tree. He gave them a saltwater spring, she says with a smirk. I gave them olives. Have you tried baking without oil? Tragedy. You walk beside her through memory and myth. The Parthenon flickers into view, grand and quiet, and just when the atmosphere begins to feel too reverent, she glances over and says, by the way, the horse, totally not my idea. I told Odysseus it was tacky, but did he listen? No. And now it's a tourist trap. The owl hoots again. Definitely. Disappointed this time, Athena sits on a marble bench and gestures for you to do the same. You realize the stone shapes itself to your comfort, cradling your spine like it's studied ergonomics. Do you know the hardest part of wisdom? She asks softly. It's not finding answers. It's knowing which questions matter. There's a quiet hum beneath her words. The ancient weight of philosophers arguing over olives and ethics, of scribes translating forgotten truths. Some historians argue Athena was never fully separate from Zeus, that she was born of his mind, not a mother. Others say she predates the Olympians altogether, an ancient echo of matriarchal knowledge. Athena herself simply smiles. Let them debate. Wisdom doesn't require applause. A gust of wind picks up. Scrolls float by. You catch phrases like, just virtue, hidden justice, and how not to be a centaur in traffic. You start to feel a deep, slow understanding settle in your bones. Not facts, but something older. Like remembering the shape of your own breath. Athena stands. You won't find all the answers here, but sometimes clarity isn't about having more light. It's about noticing the shadows. She reaches out and taps your forehead gently. A single feather from her owl drifts into your lap, and then, with the finality of a closing book, the world shifts again. Marble melts into moss, armor fades into distant echoes, and you fall not downward but inward, into the soft spirals of story, where truth and myth curl like steam. You tumble softly now, like a feather caught in the breeze. Gone is the gleam of Athena's temple, replaced by a warm golden glow and the faint, unmistakable scent of freshly baked bread. You land, gently this time, thank the gods, on a cushion. That smells faintly of thyme and sun-warmed wool. You're in a bustling kitchen. Not just any kitchen, no, this is Mount Olympus's communal kitchen. And standing near a countertop made entirely of stacked lyres is a very flustered god, Apollo. But this isn't sun-chariot-driving, plague-smiting golden boy Apollo. This is apron-wearing, spoon-wielding, I just burned the ambrosia again Apollo. There's flour in his hair. His quiver is being used to dry spaghetti, and his expression screams, I regret every choice I've made since sunrise. You clear. Your throat. Apollo jumps like he just saw his own Yelp reviews. Oh, great, he mutters. Another audience. You notice a small wooden sign stuck to the wall with celestial chewing gum. It reads, Tonight, Apollo's open mic night. Please, clap, he sighs. Look, I was trying to reinvent myself. Get in touch with the mortals, comedy's hard. You settle into a nearby beanbag shaped like a golden lyre. Apollo takes a deep breath, raises an eyebrow, and launches into his routine. So, two mortals walk into a temple. He pauses. No, wait, that's not it. One mortal walks into a temple, the other one gets turned into a goat. Classic Zeus. You try to chuckle politely. Apollo flinches. Too soon, he flips through a scroll of jokes. You catch snippets. Heracles and the world's worst gym membership. Dionysus walks into a vineyard. Hera's mood swings, a seasonal forecast. Look, he says, sitting down next to you. I'm the god of music, poetry, sunlight. But nobody ever asks how I'm doing. You think writing limericks about oracles is easy? You do not in fact think that. But you nod with deep sympathy. Burnt ambrosia smells sort of like a cinnamon roll that's been cursed. Apollo looks wistful. Back. In the day, I'd shoot a plague arrow into a city, and they'd be like, oh, Apollo, mighty Apollo. Now it's all, why are you monologuing about satyrs again? Honestly, I miss being feared. You offer him a half-melted honey tart. From a nearby tray, he takes it. It crumbles like dignity. You know, people forget I was also a healer, he says. Sure, I invented medicine, but then I also cursed my own doctors. Mixed signals? Absolutely. But being a god isn't about consistency. One of the lesser-known truths. Apollo once tried to start an Olympic comedy festival. The only competitor. A very drunk Dionysus doing interpretive dance with a goat. The goat won. Some historians still debate whether Apollo ever truly embraced his lighter side, or if this whole comedy phase was just him coping with millennia of parental issues. Zeus, after all, wasn't exactly the most supportive dad. His idea of affection was not turning your crush into a tree. You look around the kitchen. It's chaos but cozy. Burnt sugar crusts the counter. A forgotten harp is playing jazz in the corner. And on the fridge, there's a note from Artemis. Don't forget the moon hunt. Bring snacks. No improv. Apollo yawns and leans back. You know, maybe laughter is the best medicine. Unless you have an arrow in your thigh, then it's definitely like gauze. The lights dim just a little. The kitchen hums quietly now, as if even Olympus needs a midnight lull. Stick around long enough, he says, and even gods start wondering what it's all for. Praise fades, statues crumble. But a good punchline? That's immortal. You feel the beanbag beneath you slowly dissolve into a warm, sunlit mist. The kitchen blurs, Apollo's laughter echoing like a fading melody, and just as you drift again, you hear his voice once more. This time soft, almost shy. Hey, thanks for listening. Your vision is foggy at first, as though you're wrapped in layers of the finest linen. Then, with the gentlest of transitions, the scene sharpens, sort of. You're still very much in the clouds, quite literally. Only now, you're lounging on a marble bench suspended by nothing but breeze and divine ego. To your left floats a golden sign that reads, Mount Olympus Internal Talent, Showcase, Do Not Heckle the Deities. A gong sounds soft as thunder after a nap, and onto a misty stage steps. Hermes wearing winged sneakers, an oversized trench coat, for drama obviously, and a pair of sunglasses he definitely borrowed from a modern teenager. All right, he says, tipping an imaginary fedora. Let's get this party started. You blink slowly. Hermes is not only the god of messengers, thieves, and travelers, but also the unofficial gossip columnist of Olympus. It's true. Some claim the Iliad was just one of his juicier rumor scrolls that got out of hand. Tonight, Hermes begins, I bring you stories no mortal bard dared to tell, secrets from the gods, uncensored. Well, mildly censored. This is still Olympus. We have standards. He throws a dramatic wink in your direction and starts pacing. Let's talk about Apollo's other musical phase, the one where he tried to make a boy band with 3 satyrs and a flute-playing dryad. Called it Golden. Strings and goat things. Lasted 2 rehearsals. One of them kept chewing the instruments. You smile. Somehow you're not surprised. Hermes continues, twirling his caduceus like a stand-up mic. Ever heard of Dionysus's wine-fueled decision to start a spa retreat on the back of a giant sea turtle? No? That's because Poseidon accidentally stepped on it. Family drama ensued. Dionysus swore off family reunions and invented karaoke. He pauses for effect. You ever try to outsing a siren after 4 goblets of ambrosia? No? Good. Keep it that way. You can't help it. You chuckle. Out loud. Hermes flashes a grin like a neon sign. Somewhere behind him, a bored Hephaestus is adjusting stage lights with a hammer and a shrug. Ares, off to the side, is pretending not to laugh, but definitely is. And Aphrodite. She's busy scrolling through. A reflective pool that works like a divine iPad. Here's the thing, Hermes says, getting quieter now. The mortals remember us for the big stuff, wars, storms, births, betrayals, but we had downtime too. He kicks a marble pebble off the edge of the floating stage. There were nights when Hera and Hestia played board games for hours, when Artemis secretly wrote poetry about the moon's lonely reflection, when Zeus tried to brew beer but made a thunderstorm instead. Again, you lean back, feeling the bench tilt just a bit, like the world is cradling you gently. Some historians argue these tales are exaggerated, Hermes says with a mock gasp. Imagine exaggeration in mythology. He leans in, stage whispering. Others think they're metaphor. But I think maybe we just wanted to be remembered not as divine beings, but as people, with bad ideas, brilliant mistakes, and occasional cosmic karaoke. The air thickens with the sound of heavenly applause. It's not loud, just soft, rippling through, the clouds like polite clapping made of moonlight. Anyway, Hermes says, adjusting his glasses, time's almost up. I've got dreams to sneak into and socks to steal. But before I go, he walks over to you, places something in your hand. It's a golden key, glowing faintly warm. Keep this. It unlocks a door that leads to every forgotten story. Use it when the world feels too loud, too real. Then, like the breeze he so often rides, Hermes disappears with a bow and a flourish, leaving only a faint echo of laughter behind. And as you look down at the key resting in your palm, it starts to melt into soft light, dissolving like morning. Mist, you're not sure where you'll drift next, but you're certain now. It'll be somewhere between absurdity and comfort. Almost home, just one more breath, and you'll be there. Somewhere between the last trace of Hermes' laughter and the first soft whisper of silence, you feel yourself floating, not falling, just gently releasing. Like a dream, letting go of its own edges. You find yourself in an open amphitheater, carved into the side of a golden cliff that hums faintly with harp strings. The sun has already dipped behind the horizon, but the sky refuses to go dark. It just glows, a sleepy kind of peach, tinged with lavender. On stage, sitting cross-legged, on a plump cloud shaped like a bar stool, is Apollo. He's alone. No lyre, no laurel wreath, no crowd. Just him wearing a toga that's slightly rumpled, looking into the middle distance with the expression of someone who's about to deliver the world's most average stand-up routine. So, he begins, the other day I tried to explain the concept of sunlight to a cyclops. Bad idea. You blink slowly. You're not sure if you're supposed to laugh, but Apollo's face says he doesn't care. He's committed to the bit. Have you ever tried to tell someone who only has one eye that shadows are normal? He thought he was haunted. By his own. Toes, he pauses deadpan. It took me 3 days to convince him not to start a cult based on candlelight. Okay, that one gets a soft chuckle out of you. Apollo nods, accepting the mild reaction like a seasoned open mic comic. Anyway, that's not even the weird part. You'd think being the god of prophecy would mean I always know when a joke will land. Nope. I once bombed so badly at a feast that Dionysus fake choked on a grape just to change the subject. He leans back, resting his elbows on nothing. The air holds him up, of course it does. They don't tell you this in hymns and epic poems, but we gods have weird hobbies. I wrote limericks for 100 years. Artemis knitted scarves for trees. Zeus tried writing a sitcom once, called it Cloudy with a Chance of Thunder. It was exactly as bad as it sounds. You notice something strange. Apollo's tone isn't self-deprecating, just honest. It's the kind of humor that doesn't need a punchline. The kind that exists just to say, hey, we all try things that don't work. He looks straight at you. You know, they always expect me to be the golden boy, god of music, light, medicine, the works. But sometimes I just want to be the guy who plays sad songs on a broken harp and tells awkward jokes about olives. You smile, because that version of Apollo feels more familiar than any statue ever carved in his name. There was a time, he continues softly, when I thought being remembered meant being perfect. That myths had to be grand, polished, dramatic. A breeze stirs the amphitheater, lifting a few loose strands of light from his hair. He doesn't notice. But now I think maybe it's the forgotten moments that matter most. The lazy afternoons, the failed punchlines, the way someone laughs not because the joke is good, but because it's you telling it. Some historians still argue whether Apollo actually attempted comedy. Most say no, some say yes. A few say he invented sarcasm entirely after getting stuck in traffic caused by a chariot race. But you've seen it now, or dreamed it maybe. Same difference. The god of light sits in near darkness now, smiling at nothing, as if even the stars are too sleepy to judge him. All right, he says, standing up slowly. That's my time. He gives you a wink. Tip your waiters. Don't. Let Hermes near your wallets, and remember, he raises a finger glowing faintly gold. Sometimes the best stories aren't the ones with heroes or monsters. They're the ones where nothing explodes, no one transforms, and the only thing at stake is whether or not someone laughs. Then he turns, walks off the cloud stage, and vanishes into the lavender sky, whistling something soft and aimless. You lie back. The amphitheater melts away, so do the cliffs, the myths, the gods, even the gold. All that remains is a sky made of whispering silk and a warmth that says, "You're safe now. The stories are over. You can sleep." Your breath slows. One more inhale, and you remember Apollo's last line. One more exhale and you let it go. No more jokes, no more chariots, just stars, quiet, peace. The myths have all gone home.